Hi, my name is Whitney Collins. I've been helping people compete in the job market for 10 years. I've helped hundreds and hundreds of job seekers compete to win in the job market with consistent and reliable results. At the secret of my job development service strategy has always been accurate, user friendly, and persuasive content. So I want to invite you to look at a product I've been working on I want to share with you. It's the Job Seekers Reference Library. And I made it so that workforce program professionals, social service workers, job developers, and case managers can help their job seekers better compete in the job market. So let's take a look at the Job Seekers Reference Library and how it works. Basically, it's these two documents here, an Excel spreadsheet and a Microsoft Word document. Here behind is the Excel spreadsheet. As you can see, it's a very large Excel spreadsheet with lots of content. Each row in this Excel spreadsheet is a different occupation and has a lot of content that basically describes what those people do in that job. And here, this is the skeleton document. Now, these two documents are merged together. If you're familiar how it works, basically there's a skeleton document in Word, and the content from the Excel spreadsheet is piped in to different merge fields in the skeleton document. So what it does is it creates 755 different unique books for each row in this Excel spreadsheet. So the Job Seekers Reference Library has 755 different books. Each book is for a different occupation, and the one we're looking at right here is for registered nurse. So let's take a closer look at that because that's what your job seekers really want. So here is the first page. I'm going to zoom in on it. And you can see here these icons are basically the order in which your job seekers should be approaching getting ready for the job market. The resumes, the cover letters, filling out their LinkedIn profile, collecting recommendation letters from previous employers or instructors or their peers, setting up their Indeed account, knowing how to do follow-up letters, how to call employers, how to prepare for interviews, how to write thank you letters, how to do offer responses, how to negotiate their wages. And then these tools in here are more on the case management side, like an individual employment plan, a checklist for job seekers, an activity log, informational interview kit, an internship plan. And in these sections here, this is kind of like when you need to dive deep with your job seeker and explain more things about how the resume should be put together and why certain components and elements of the resume are done that way. So let's look at, for example, the resume. And it's all hyperlinked, so it makes it easier to navigate. So if you're a registered nurse, you would go to this book, and you can click on here. And you can see in the reference library we have 4 different examples: a standard resume that sells the skills, a student resume, and a mini resume, or basically a social profile. Let's look at the standard resume and see how it's put together and the certain elements. So here it is. This is the resume for a registered nurse. And let's zoom in here to the top. These elements here, where the job seeker's information is put in, is from the Excel spreadsheet. So you or your job seeker can put in the Excel spreadsheet their name and their contact information, and it will automatically pipe in, like the rest of the merge fields in the document, all of their content into all the letters and all the resumes and all the case management paperwork, saving them lots of time. So it's a great way, just basically you can tell your job seekers are literally prepared with rough draft content for every job in the occupational spectrum, and their name is on it. So here's what they're getting. You can see in here the objective at the top is pre-written, filled out form. Of course, they will need to edit some of this. Here is the keywords section. You can see registered nurses have lots of keywords and skills. They wouldn't go to market with all these skills and keywords on the resume, but they would go through here and basically edit out this keywords that don't really apply to what they have to offer in the job market or don't hold a lot of value. Here, this part in here saves lots of time. This is really at the nuts and bolts of the whole content generation system. These are the job duties or job tasks of a registered nurse, and they're ordered from basically most important to least important, and your job developer or your job seeker would go through this and throw out or edit the job tasks that they did not do at their last employment. And this is what I found the most time-saving element of the whole job seekers reference library, is that this content in here can take hours and hours and hours from your job developer, your case managers, or your employment specialist, or out of your job seekers, time and effort, just crafting this content. And here it is. It's already rewritten. It's in first draft format, so they would want to go through this and, of course, and massage this content and make it more ready for the job market. And of course, you wouldn't go into the market with this many bullet points. I recommend somewhere between 3 and 9, depending on the level of experience that the job seeker has. And this section as well is all populated from the reference library. So your job seeker would need to fill out one of the cells in the reference library, which I can show you. So basically, here's the templated name. So you'd go through and highlight this and then drop all this content down. And the same thing right in here for this education miscellaneous section. So you'd go through here, do this content once, and then it would populate basically this section automatically for the whole reference library for that specific job seeker. So going back up to the top, let's go look at the cover letters. And here's 14 different cover letters. They're all templated out. So your job seeker could be using different cover letters for different types of occupations or job openings that they'll be applying to. Let's take a look at the standard one so you get an idea. Again, here's the content from the job seeker's contact information, which automatically piped into each of the letters. Here is the skeleton part of the document. And in here, we zoom in, here's what the registered nurse skills that should be highlighted in the cover letters. For example, social perceptiveness, being aware of others' reactions and understanding why they react as they do. That's what employers are really looking for in registered nurses in a general way. Having knowledge of medicine, knowledge of information techniques used in diagnosis or treatment of injuries and diseases. Again, it's not finished quality content, but it is first draft quality, so that you're telling the job seeker, yeah, this is what is most likely looking for when you're writing a cover letter for a registered nurse opportunity. I find that this template system of cover letters really allows job seekers to apply to more jobs more often and basically expand into more of the market because they have more cover letters to basically address different issues that they might be facing in the job market. Perhaps they're applying for a director of nursing and they are underqualified for that. Well, there's a cover letter for that. Not enough experience, so you'd go to this one instead. So let's go back at the top, and there's a whole section on LinkedIn and basically how to fill out the LinkedIn. Again, it's piping the information right out of the Excel spreadsheet and going into the LinkedIn screenshots and basically showing people, okay, this is the type of picture you should have, and this is what you should say for different parts, like this is the summary part. And it really helps motivate and accelerate that person's job seeker's preparation to get in the job market. So after they do the LinkedIn profile, I recommend going back to their instructors, previous peers, and supervisors and getting recommendation letters. And what I do with my job seekers is I help them basically write a rough draft quality that they could then send to their previous supervisors and ask them to edit them as they wish and then return it in a preferred time. It's a much better response rate and it looks really good, and you don't get like a generic boilerplate cover letter or recommendation letter back from them. So it really makes the recommendation letter much more powerful. So how to use Indeed. Indeed accounts for more job placements than any other job board on the internet. And basically it shows you the tips and tricks and tools on Indeed. Here's the follow-up letter reference library. We won't go to it, but basically after you apply, I always recommend to my job seekers to set a calendar date to go back and make a follow-up appointment or follow-up appointment with themselves to write another letter to that employer and highlight a different element. And what this does, it basically gives you the opportunity to, in marketing terms, drip back on that employer and say, hey, I'm still very interested. I'm not just shotgunning a bunch of applications out there. Please take another look at what I have to offer. And what this does in the application tracking system of the employer is that it basically makes your file much more dense. So when they do come time to go call in for interviews, they can see this job seeker is very motivated. They applied, they followed up, and they showed consistency and effective communication qualities that employers really look for. And this right here is a section that I always recommend, but I hardly ever get a job seeker to take me up on it. But it is probably the most effective way to job hunt in the job market, and that's calling employers. And it's a highly effective, but it's like I describe it as like digging ditches. You have to call 20, 30, 40 employers before you basically get to that job in the job market that nobody else knows about it. It's not in the market, and that's the whole point, is basically intercept demand before it goes to market. And this has a script and basically how to set that up. Here's the interview prep. We can go to this section here. Interview prep, it's the 21 interview questions and answers, and basically the most likely questions like, tell me about yourself. And this is a absolutely important element of anyone's job search readiness, is being prepared for interview questions. That is the game day. If you're a job developer or career coach and you're not helping them with their interview prep in a systematic way, you really need to up your game. And this is a great section to basically go over with your job seeker. So much time and effort has gone into their career at this point, or the job campaign. You really have to get into and be prepared to answer basic questions like, what's your long-range objective? And this gives that content in rough draft format that they can then massage or just go over and know the key talking points that they need to bring up. So let's go back up to the top and look at the next step in the job search process. Thank you letters. Of course, you want to separate yourself from the competition after the interview process. Chances are they've interviewed 2 or 3 other candidates. And your job seekers really need to differentiate themselves after the interview process when the employer is in the decision-making mode with thank you letters. And in here is a whole section of thank you letters. And we have thank you for the interview. And you want to really address key elements that have been brought up. Perhaps the candidate was not qualified, and that was determined. It was obvious in the interview. Well, there's a follow-up or thank you letter for the interview that addresses specific things and helps overcome that objection. Or if you just graduated from school, it's a great way to, at that point, just basically follow up with a thank you letter that kind of addresses some of those elements or objections that employers might have after interviewing a new student or a new job seeker that's just graduated. So offer responses, we don't need to go in this section, but it's basically, when you get an offer, you do want to respond formally with a written letter, or if you get a rejection notice, I recommend following up with the letters as well. You never know if that employer made a bad decision and 90 days later they're still looking, or they go back in the market, or they're growing and they're hiring another person and they like that final touch. Nobody ever does it, and if your employer probably interviewed 3 or 4 other people, and the person they chose doesn't write a offer letter, or the other people don't, ask for feedback, chances are they're going to like your style, your job seeker style of having that consistent follow up. So I highly recommend doing offer responses, whether they're positive offers or negative offers. Negotiating wages here, this section is basically a script on how to approach employers, the information you need before you do that, how to do a self-assessment on what you're really offering employers, and where to go in the job market to find out if you're not getting what is considered fair market value. This next section here is really for case managers and career employment specialists that are in public service. And all people in public service usually have to do what's called the individualized employment plan. And this is it pre-templates the whole IEP for your job to the case management side. And this would be the initial document I would use with my caseload. And basically this is, what do you want to do? Oh, you want to be a registered nurse? And then you would go to your IEP skeleton document. You'd copy this right out of here, paste it in a new document, and you'd walk through it basically word for word. Or you can send it to them and ask them to basically edit it. It depends on the caliber of the job seeker. But it's from here in this IEP that you would then basically use this content to really help them either overcome barriers to employment, or document for the case management, or put into your electronic case management database by copying and pasting it. And it has the barriers of employment already in there, and you would just basically go through, and instead of writing them out, you're just going through and deleting them. And it makes a much more consistent case management service strategy, regardless of your skill level of your case managers or experience of case managers. It really brings basically a full amount of detail from the beginning, rather a deductive process rather than going through and trying to gather information. And I find that this strategy really helps build rapport as well with your job seeker. So I highly recommend, if you're in public service, to use that IEP strategy. And let's go back up. You have a checklist. This is a really pretty much generic checklist, and I included in here, there's no skeleton document or content coming in here from the Excel spreadsheet. We're just looking at what I would consider a checklist of things your job seekers need to do. And you just print it out, and basically this is their to-do list, or I describe it to job seekers or caseloads as, this is the treasure hunt. And before we go on your job hunt, we got to get ready for your job hunt. And this is the things we need to do. So it has the element and a quick description. And I think that really helps as well, like help control some of the lost emotions job seekers have, especially those long-term unemployed people where they really don't know how to reinvent their job search campaign. And it's a good tool to basically initiate that. An activity log, I'm not sure if you're going to need this. This is in those situations where you're in a job hunt or a social service program where you really need to keep track of your job seekers' activity and how they're spending their time on their day. So this is basically an activity report. And again, it's really generic. It's not piped in with the content information. It's just a tool, a generic tool. Here's your informational interview kit, and we don't need to go to it, but if you're familiar with helping job seekers get into the job market by using this strategy, it's used for people who are in career changes or right out of school, and it's you basically approach an employer over the phone, I recommend, or door to door. There's a script in there, and it basically says, hey, I'm interested in becoming a registered nurse, and I was hoping that somebody there at your clinic would be available for 5 to 10 minutes. I could bring in some coffee and some donuts, and they can tell me about their career path, and I would have a better opportunity before I pursue becoming a nurse or 2 or 3 years of schooling to become a nurse. I want to make sure I'm making the right decision. And it's like cold calling employers for employment. You don't get, right away, but it's definitely worthwhile for your job seekers to call 30, 40 clinics or hospitals or wherever they might be going in the job market if they're going to go and reinvent their career to use the informational interview style. Here's a internship plan, and this internship plan, again, is for case managers that need to document internship plans to keep their employers out of hot water, Department of Labor. And it's basically a templated plan, and it will pipe in all your job seekers' information and put it in a format where you can structure the internship as a learning experience. And that's really important to make sure your employers are not getting into hot water with the Department of Labor by structuring it as a learning experience. So that's another much needed tool. It's totally underutilized in workforce development programs, and a lot of people don't use it. And unfortunately, I don't always use it on the first try. I use it very specific situations, and I hope you're including it in your service strategy, especially working with younger people or people right out of education. You want to make sure, it's a great way to basically sneak in the market as well, and to put additional information on the resume so when they go back into the market, they have something, a transitional work experience. And in this section here about resumes and about letters, we don't really need to dive into there. That's describing really far into, each section of a resume, and that would be more appropriate to get into that if your job program has a lot of academic elements like a career readiness, and you're working with people that don't have a clue and need to really be brought up to speed. And it's basically set up to break down each element of the resume and each element of the cover letter. And it basically gives lots of different examples. It's in this section here. This is the occupational information for each resume. So all that content in the Excel spreadsheet is here in this section. And you can kind of see, I'll go through here quickly. There's a lot of information in here. And again, you're not going to really dive into all this, but if you do need to, and you need to go deeper for content, it's right there. It's ready for you. And if your job seekers want that deeper content, it's there. So that's basically the job seekers, an introduction to the job seekers reference library. If you're a school or a vocational training center, a college or a workforce development program, or a social service provider, and your students or participants or clients are relying on you to help them, compete in today's job market, I think you owe them access to the job seekers reference library so that they can get the jobs they want, with less hassle, faster, and for better pay. And I hope you're able to utilize this reference library in a powerful way, and it becomes a central element of your job development service strategy. And your job seekers, I can assure you, will thank you that you're not just sending them to the computer and wishing them luck on their job hunt. You're really giving them everything they could possibly need for pretty much every job search in the entire standard occupational classification system, all 755 jobs. And it's a very powerful tool. I hope you find it very useful and central to your service strategy. So thank you for watching.